Magandang gabi, Sabado na naman, Senior City Kwentuhan from 7 to 8 p.m. Every week po, we come to you, brought by ENet Philippines, Senior sa Panahon ng COVID, Lapis SeeSaw Channel, and the Philippine Rural Reconstruction Movement. And your co-host since 2020, ako po si Ed De La Torre. This week, ang ating episode ay tungkol sa the Blue Economy. Why? Because last week po we celebrated on July 12 the victory of the Philippines sa Arbitral Ruling about our rights to the exclusive economic zone natin. And so there was a conference on the Blue Economy and there were two episodes produced by Newswatch which we co-sponsored and we are playing them for you tonight.
Magandang gabi. Ako ay co-host ngayon ni Ed De La Torre, si Girly Villariba. May salitan po kami sa mga episodes, si Kai po at si Berna sa mga susunod at pagkatapos kami uli ni Ed. Pero ngayong gabi po, ang pag-uusapan natin ay napakahalaga, the Blue Economy. Kasi kailangan po nating sariwain ang Arbitral Award noong July 12. Ito po ay napakahalaga dahil bahagi po ito ng ating MANA, Maritime Archipelagic Nation. At bahagi po ito dun sa awareness at advocacy namin. Kaya lahat po tayo ay makinig at pag-usapan ang nanatili nating kayamanan sa karagatan, the Blue Economy.
The Philippines is a maritime archipelagic nation, or MANA. The Philippines' exclusive economic zone covers an estimated 2.2 million square kilometers of water. In the West Philippine Sea, an estimated $3.3 trillion of trade passes annually. We sit with thought leaders who will discuss the intricate trade of marine-based products and tackle the issue of energy. I'm attorney Karen Jimeno, and this is the way forward. Mr. Edicio De La Torre is the president of the Philippine Rural Reconstruction Movement and is the founder and current president of the Education for Life Foundation, an NGO that runs a grassroots leadership formation program. Good morning, Father Ed.
Morning, Karen. Good to see you again.
And congratulations on the recent roundtable discussion on the Blue Economy. Meron po bang mga moments na nagkaroon ng heated discussions?
Passionate, but not heated.
Okay.
Because heated sometimes is contradictory. They were talking from experience. Well, I think not just for the fisher folk, even for those who have been in rural development, urban development, I think there's a realization that the blue economy is a framework that should have been there long ago because we tend to be land-centric, land-focused. And so towards the end, they were saying, what is the kind of governance that we need? Do we just do intergovernmental or do we eventually have a kind of a singular ministry like Indonesia?
Like you always say, no, mana natin ito.
Yes.
And with that, what is the cause if we do not develop
Yeah, well,
our maritime environment?
our neighbors have already unified policies and even governance. We don't have that. I realize we need both the private commercial sector and the government. How can we collaborate? So there has to be action at the global level. You know, even the European Union makes sure that you cannot export to them if it is illegal, unreported, unsustainable. But also at the national level.
Do you think we should have a dedicated department that is focused on the maritime environment and the blue economy?
You have to have a dominant lead, accountable agency, and give it resources.
Problema nila yun, no? Wala silang unified data that's consistent and updated.
Dalawa, it's a combination of collection, but also putting it together and make it useful for not only policy, but for programs. Data includes also experiences that are comparable and from different places. That kind of data if it is wedded with the statistics, the trends and all that, it will give a much better informed base for policy because, there will always be conflicting interests. And you have government's role is precisely how to balance.
Who is willing to shoulder the cost of data gathering and consolidation?
Well, obviously, the one initially should be government. After all, it's in the national interest, but also government's interest, because this is not net expense. It could be a big source of income. However, I think personally, although I come from the NGO, I have a bias toward grassroots, I think I also have changed my mind. We need corporations. And we need corporations who will do it because of their legitimate self-interest. So we're not asking them to be selfless. We're asking them to have an expanded sense of self.
Have you thought about bringing this conversation to the global arena? Perhaps having this type of conversation with stakeholders from different countries?
Oh, definitely. At the very least, partly because of geography and our political alliances, ASEAN is a very logical target because especially compared to us, Indonesia and parts of Malaysia, they're all archipelagic. So I think definitely. Then of course, the big players from China to South Korea to Japan, they have to be brought in because we are like in one area where we have common seas. That's why, just as in the Philippines, we need a common, clearly stated policy and governance. I think at the regional level, we have to do the same. But while we assert our rights, I think we should reach out and look for ways we can collaborate.
How should the Philippines position itself vis-a-vis other countries when it comes to the trade war? So that's something that is happening right now with President Trump in terms of imposing tariffs when it comes to tariffs against Europe, Canada, China.
One of our biggest markets is the European Union, and they have policies. We better align with those because it opens the market. And we try to, as much as possible, diversify our relationship and not be stuck and identified in a highly polarizing situation with one side or the other. As they say, be the adults when people are childish and playing power games.
So I would like to discuss briefly, what do you think have been the impact of the Philippine Maritime Zones Law and the Archipelagic Sea Lanes Act? Has it had any positive impacts on the blue economy?
So I think the passage, including hopefully the Blue Economy law of the initial laws on maritime defining I think it's very important, including the activation of the National Maritime Council. In the end, governance is about you must have laws, you must have implementing units.
What do you think are laws that are still needed right now?
Well, because of the whole controversy on commercial fishers not really being allowed, but the Supreme Court saying, a preferential option for the small fisher folk over municipal waters is like unconstitutional, and they had the debate about that. I think there has to be clarity about that. So if there are not enough laws have to be formulated. Dapat may lead agency responsible and lead person. Was it President Ramos who initiated the bibingka concept? May reform from top raw, reform from below. Apoy sa ibabaw, apoy sa ilalim.
Thank you so much, Ed. Very insightful as always, and it's always an honor to interview you.
Well, the pleasure is all mine, but more important, as they say, in addition to insights, what's more important is to pose questions that force me to think. And you have done that constantly every time we meet. So thank you.
Maraming salamat. That was Mr. Edicio de la Torre, and I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno. And this is The Way Forward.
Energy powers our economy, our homes, and our future. But with rising fossil fuel costs, environmental challenges, and increasing energy demands, the Philippines must look to more sustainable solutions. The Philippines ranks 105 out of 120 countries in the Energy Transition Index, lagging behind its Southeast Asian neighbors. But despite this, the country is making progress. Renewable energy now contributes 50.2% to our energy mix, and new technologies are opening doors to marine-based energy sources. The ocean holds vast, untapped potential for clean energy. Marine energy technologies, such as offshore wind, tidal, and wave energy, offer a predictable, resilient, and sustainable power source for coastal and island communities. In 2023, ocean-based power generation contributed 96.99 million pesos to the blue economy, supporting thousands of jobs and expanding clean energy access. Offshore wind farms in Ilocos Norte, Guimaras, and Mindoro are already making an impact, with the potential for offshore wind farms to generate 178 gigawatts in the future. The United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 7 calls for affordable, reliable, and sustainable energy for all. Global partnerships and investments are driving innovation in renewable energy, including marine energy solutions. The Philippine government is taking action. Under the National Energy Efficiency and Conservation Plan, the goal is to achieve 35% renewable energy by 2030 and 50% by 2040. This includes streamlining renewable energy projects, encouraging international investment, and establishing a green energy market to promote clean power alternatives. By investing in marine energy, offshore wind, and sustainable technologies, we can reduce dependence on fossil fuels, protect our environment, and power a cleaner, more resilient future. The future of energy is here. Let's harness the power of our oceans and drive sustainable progress together.
We need sustainable management of our marine resources. Marine resources are not infinite. We need to maintain, conserve, protect our marine resources, which are the breeding and nursery habitats, so we can prevent recruitment overfishing as well. At the moment, the world's oceans are maxed out in terms of the carrying capacity, especially of carbon dioxide. This is where you get ocean acidification. That means coral reef structures will be weakened. I think it's been proposed that by about 2040, 2050, the majority of the world's coral reefs will be in a severe state, in line with the solid eco-waste law, the RA 9003. We need that implemented at the local level as well as throughout the country as well.
Mr. Guido Delgado was the president of National Power Corporation from 1994 to 1998, improving the power situation in the country by implementing various programs and projects. Hello, Guido. Welcome to The Way Forward.
A pleasure and an honor.
Guido, this question may sound counterintuitive because when you talk about cost, normally it relates to the cost of developing something. But when it comes to power and energy, what is the cost to not develop and protect our resources?
Well, if we look at 25 years ago, it's the only number that I can remember, the cost of the brownouts was something like 65 pesos per kilowatt hour, which is like 6-7 times the cost of the power at the time. I reckon that the cost of not having power should be closer to 100 pesos per kilowatt hour.
And this amount comes from the opportunity cost of not having livelihood,
Okay.
inefficiency?
There are 3 or 4 components. Number one, and which is very important, is education. Not having electricity has a very deep impact on education. Right now, our grade 12 kids, if I remember correctly, they have the ability of grade 3. Second is health. So access to health requires access to electricity because of, well, not only hospital needs, but keeping the proper refrigeration of medicines, vials, etc. And number 3 is, as you pointed out, is livelihood, access to livelihood, whether it's going to be a small trading sari-sari store. You really need to have those
Would you say that the deregulation of our energy sector led to higher prices or more unaffordability for the poor consumers?
I think, in fairness to today's environment, I think there's a lot more enthusiasm, let's say, the part of investors to put up power plants rather than before when Napocor was just a sole monopoly. But I think the way that we have deregulated and privatized brought up some problems that we need to address, particularly in the area of regulation. But I think the culprit lies in the way that we have been adopting the rate-making methodology, which leaves a lot to be desired. And I said, the only way to get these blue technologies off the ground is the government should invest in these technologies, because you cannot rely on the Energy Regulatory Commission because their job is to bring down the rates. I believe the government should get that out from the GAA budget.
Can you give us an idea? What kind of power and energy resources can we harness from the blue economy?
Let's set aside let's say the standard renewable energies like solar, floating solar, or offshore wind. What I want to discuss are the real blue economy technologies, one of which I encountered. I think the technology came from Norway or Denmark, where they use the temperature difference between the surface and 300 feet. Hopefully the electricity from there, you connect it to the shore and you can electrify coastal towns, for example. Another is the tidal energy, where it's really wind turbine, but designed for under the sea. And then third, you can have the wave technology. But if you want to have a long-term view of what we can potentially develop, I think the government has to set aside some money to bring in those technologies in collaboration with the other countries.
How would developing these types of resources with new technologies go hand in hand with any efforts to revive nuclear energy in the Philippines?
I think the new technologies of what they call SMRs, or small modular reactors, that I think has a better future, because then you can bring in smaller power plants in smaller communities, which would be easier to deploy.
The energy produced from nuclear power has shown that it can be cheap and affordable, and we've seen this all over the world.
Now, there is consumers in what they call SPUG islands, or the small island grids. They pay only 7 pesos because that's subsidized. So you and me are paying 24 minus 7. So that's about 17 pesos per kilowatt hour. The people of Luzon, Visayas, we pay for that difference. So if your technology can replace that kind of cost, then that's the perfect place to go and implement these technologies.
But I'm going to go back to the competitiveness of the Philippines. If we require consumers to subsidize all of these unbundled charges instead of the government, then we won't be able to compete with our neighboring countries in terms of attracting investments for manufacturing and even data centers or other types of industries now, energy intensive.
They still have to go through that competitive selection process and the Energy Regulatory Commission approval. So you have a huge regulatory risk. So putting up the nuclear power plant, that's the easy part. Getting the nuclear power plant to sell to Meralco or to all the cooperatives, that's the challenge.
With your experience, you were involved in Napocor and your years of experience in the energy sector, do you think that there is a need for an overarching law that will cover the blue economy?
As far as energy is concerned, there has to be a huge change in the way that the new blue ocean technologies will be introduced into the power sector. So that's one. Second is there has to be a decentralization of the development of that power through what's called distributed energy resources. So local.
Thank you so much, Guido. Very
always a pleasure.
Wise insights.
Thank you very much.
Again, that was Guido Delgado, and I'm attorney Karen Jimeno. And this is the way forward.
PRRM has spent over 7 decades in rural development. We were biased in favor of farmers, and the fisherfolk told us, food is not just rice, it is also fish. The Philippines is more than 300,000 square kilometers of land.
Our exclusive economic zone is 2.2 million square kilometers. We are the 15th largest fishing nation in the world. The Philippines is a maritime and archipelagic nation or MANA. Mana natin ito. We must defend it.
The Philippines sits at the heart of the Coral Triangle, home to over 500 coral species and 2,500 fish species. Our waters are some of the most biodiverse in the world, yet they face growing threats. Fisheries and aquaculture are the largest contributors to the country's ocean economy, adding 269.40 billion pesos to GDP and employing over 1 million Filipinos. But despite their importance, marine ecosystems are in danger. 90% of Philippine corals are in poor or fair condition, putting food security and livelihoods at risk. The Ocean Health Index ranks the Philippines 197 out of 220 countries, with low scores in food provision and coastal livelihoods. Challenges like overfishing, plastic pollution, habitat destruction, and climate change are taking a toll on our marine resources. The Philippines is taking action. As part of the Coral Triangle Initiative and multiple global agreements, we are committed to protecting biodiversity, conserving marine habitats, and ensuring sustainable fisheries. Locally, the government has implemented key initiatives such as marine protected areas, coastal and marine ecosystem management programs, and the Philippine Ecosystem and Natural Capital Accounting System, ensuring our marine resources are valued and protected. But we need a streamlined governance structure, stronger policies, stricter enforcement, and community-driven solutions. By empowering local governments, reducing destructive fishing practices, and expanding marine protected areas, we can build a resilient and thriving blue economy. Our oceans are our lifeline. Protecting them today means securing food, jobs, and a sustainable future for generations to come. Join the movement. Support sustainable fisheries. Protect our seas.
Dr. Rodora Asanza is a professor emeritus from the National Academy of Science and Technology and the University of the Philippines Marine Science Institute. She also led the Philippine component of the Belmont Forum Global Project, entitled Coast and Ocean Assessment for Transformation and Sustainability. Dr. Rod, welcome to The Way Forward.
My pleasure to be here.
What is the importance of developing the Philippines' maritime environment?
Our marine environment, from the coast to the areas where we can consider as part of our EEZ, we are quite big in terms of the potential for development financially, socially.
Financially, there's a lot of incentive to develop the blue economy. Considering the value that we can get from this as a country,
we need to know which areas are having the greatest potential for the living resources or the non-living resources. The concept of the blue economy is threefold: the environment, the people, their livelihood, and sustainable development. These are three pillars of the blue economy. Well, biodiversity, I should say, is the bedrock of the marine environment in terms of the living resources. The living resources cannot be sustained without preserving, taking care of biodiversity. Pag in-over-harvest mo ang isa o namatay yung isang grupo, it will be to the detriment of the other organisms in the community. There are many species that are present in the Philippines that are not present in other areas.
In terms of preserving biodiversity, is there a real threat from global warming and climate change?
We have studied, the others in the Marine Science Institute have studies to prove that some species have been destroyed through climate change, but some they have already cultured in the laboratory, made them grow in the lab, and then transplanted them in the field. In fact, are you aware, of course, the BBNJ, Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction? It's going to be part of the UNCLOS agreement. It's going to be approved by many countries. You have to have agreements between nations that all of us should take care of that biodiversity, not only for our country, but also for the rest of the world, for the rest of humanity. And so therefore, there is that agreement, BBNJ, Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction. In the Philippines, we have already given our support. DOST, NAST, and some other agencies are supporting this agreement.
Does China and US have any role in this agreement?
I hope they will have, because it's not for them alone, it's for everyone.
Since you mentioned the DENR, when it comes to land, there are national parks or protected areas, and usually you cannot develop those areas, or you can only in limited circumstances through certain agreements that you have with the DENR. Do we have something similar when it comes to developing our marine waters?
We have land planning, land use plan, but we are still not developed in terms of the marine, coastal, and marine space planning. Because there are interactions between the land and the sea, so therefore we have to harmonize. The late President Ramos started, I think it was passed during his time, that there is a National Integrated Protected Area System. But we need to have a structure where this could be really monitored, the implementation, and how it was to be improved. Because in our system, nagtuturuan ng local government, ang DNR, ang Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources, in terms of the mandate and who's going to do that, and so on.
Do you think there's a necessity to have a department devoted to the blue economy and the marine environment?
You know, I am from the National Academy of Science and Technology, and we have been pushing for a Department of Fisheries and Marine Resources, because that can take care of the resources. But then, a department that will take care of the blue economy should be interagency, because there are other industries in the blue economy.
Because of geopolitical events, the West Philippine Sea has gotten a lot of attention as an area that needs to be protected. But what other parts of the Philippine territorial waters do you see as having a lot of potential in terms of resources that need protection?
Alam mo, lahat eh.
Lahat talaga. So,
alam mo, very rich tayo. We have more or less 5 seascapes from the north to the east, south, and then to the west, to the south, and to the east. And we need to consider the community, the fisher folks. If we need to develop and make them really prosper or survive, and so on, we have to consider them.
What would be some key goals that you think should be prioritized in the next few years in order to preserve our biodiversity, but also to make sure that we protect our blue economy?
We need to have area-based analysis of the potentials and what needs to be developed, what needs to be conserved. Area-based yan. Then come up with a national set of policies and guidelines. Kasi yung policies and guidelines na yun, inunuance nga, but knowledge-based, science-based yung implementation at the local level.
Thank you, Dr. Rod, for sharing your wisdom with us.
It will always be my pleasure to talk to you about the blue economy.
Thank you so much. We just spoke with Dr. Rodora Azanza. I am Attorney Karen Jimeno, and this is The Way Forward. The Philippines is a maritime archipelagic nation, or MANA. The Philippines' exclusive economic zone covers an estimated 2.2 million square kilometers of water. In the West Philippine Sea, an estimated $3.3 trillion of trade passes annually. We sit with thought leaders who will discuss the intricate trade of marine-based products and tackle the issue of energy. I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno, and this is The Way Forward.
PRRM has spent over 7 decades in rural development. We were biased in favor of farmers, and the fisherfolk told us, food is not just rice, it is also fish. The Philippines is more than 300,000 square kilometers of land. Our exclusive economic zone is 2.2 million square kilometers. We are the 15th largest fishing nation in the world. The Philippines is a maritime and archipelagic nation, or MANA. Mana natin ito. We must defend it.
We need sustainable management of our marine resources. Marine resources are not infinite. We need to maintain, conserve, protect our marine resources, which are the breeding and nursery habitats, so we can prevent recruitment overfishing as well. At the moment, the world's oceans are maxed out in terms of the carrying capacity, especially of carbon dioxide. This is where you get ocean acidification. That means coral reef structures will be weakened. I think it's been proposed that by about 2040, 2050, the majority of the world's coral reefs will be in a severe state, in line with the solid eco-waste law, the RA 9003. We need that implemented at the local level as well as throughout the country as well.
Mr. Roberto de Ocampo is the chairman of the board of the Philippine Veterans Bank and a founding partner of the Centennial Group International and chairman of the Centennial Asia Advisors. Chairman de Ocampo is also a recipient of the Order of the British Empire and is the chairman of the FVR Legacy Initiative and the Ramos Peace and Development Foundation. Hi, Bobby. Welcome to The Way Forward. Bobby, can you tell us what prompted you to initiate the first roundtable discussion on the blue economy?
The blue economy really is all about using our oceanic resources wisely and being able to transform that into a vital part, not only of the economy in general, but for the purpose of giving our fisher folk higher and better income and to be able to protect our environment as well.
As a former member of the cabinet of the government, what do you think are the key roles of the government and the General Appropriations Act, meaning the national budget, in enhancing and harnessing our resources in the Philippine blue economy?
Well, the first thing to remember is that this all started during the time of President Ramos. Yes, in fact, there was a piece of legislation that he promoted that comes by the acronym NIPAS, or National Integrated Protected Area Systems Act. So that embodied within our law the idea that we have to protect those resources, but at the same time bring it to the highest level of development for our economy and for our people. The way we see it, it's not just coming from the national government, although it should, of course, come with an appropriate budget from the Congress and executive branch, and the branches of the government, the different departments involved in this, should activate to the highest degree possible the implementation of that act. But beyond that, we believe that each local government must be involved in an integrated effort. That's why it's the wise use of the ocean resources, the protection of the coastal development, not only for the fact that this is an environmental goal, but it is also connected to making these areas attractive for tourism.
Where do you think the initiative should come from? Because it sounds like if it's left up to the government, it will always be political, or there would always be the risk of politicization.
At the risk of sounding biased, we didn't have this type of mental approach during the administration of President Ramos for two reasons, among others. When he came into office, I think it's 1993, we were already talking about Philippines 2000. We weren't talking about the next election. Then we gathered the Congress together very regularly in what was known as the LEDAC, or the Legislative Executive Development Advisory Council, and we met almost every week so that we all reach a consensus as to what the Congress could legislate that would fit into an overall agreed scheme of national vision where you articulate where you want the country to be by a certain year.
What would be the implications financially of having this blue economy for future generations?
Well, first, it should be able to impact the poor fishermen and make their incomes higher. Because if we protect our ocean environment, there is more to fish. And if there's more to fish, then their incomes rise. Plus the natural resource to bring the level of fishing towards an industry, which will not only provide food to the population, but provides entrepreneurial opportunities for businessmen, whether small, medium, or large scale.
And on that note, what type of assistance do you think the government should provide?
Definitely there are two things. One is to help them with respect to the modernization of their fishing capability away from bankas and outriggers to something a little more elevated. And second, as you mentioned, cold storage facilities. Now, cold storage facilities can either be a local investment by the local governments, or it could come from provincial. Then there are possibilities for the government to negotiate with foreign governments for either business partnerships or outright international financing.
So bilateral cooperation or agreements.
The whole world is interested in making sure that we don't have a shortage of overall food supply. And one of the most important sources of food supply would be the oceans themselves.
Thank you again, Bobby. It was truly a privilege to interview someone of your caliber.
Thank you very much for inviting me to your program. I've been there before, and it's an honor to be back.
Again, that was Mr. Roberto de Ocampo, and I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno. And this is the way forward.
Welcome to the first ever roundtable discussion on the Philippine Blue Economy, jointly sponsored by the FVR Legacy Initiative and the Philippine Rural Reconstruction Movement. The ocean is more than just water. It's the lifeblood of the Philippines. The Philippines' ocean-based industries contribute an estimated 7% to the country's GDP, generating jobs in fisheries, aquaculture, maritime transport, tourism, and energy. These sectors sustain millions of livelihoods, but they also face growing challenges from climate change, overfishing, and pollution. A 2017 joint study by the World Bank and the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs highlights the blue economy's potential to increase long-term benefits for coastal communities. It states, the blue economy concept seeks to promote economic growth, social inclusion, and the preservation or improvement of livelihoods, while at the same time ensuring environmental sustainability of the oceans and coastal areas. The World Bank defines the blue economy as the sustainable use of ocean resources for economic growth, improved livelihoods, and ecosystem health. The ASEAN Blue Economy Framework promotes innovation, sustainability, and regional cooperation, ensuring that Southeast Asia maximizes its ocean-based opportunities while protecting marine ecosystems. The Changwon Declaration reinforces the need for inclusive and resilient blue economy strategies, strengthening ocean governance, adapting to climate change, and safeguarding marine biodiversity. With the proposed Blue Economy Act, the Philippines is taking bold steps toward developing policies that will secure our marine industries, drive sustainable economic growth, and protect our oceans for future generations. Let us help build a governance structure that can balance competing interests, address plastic waste pollution of our seas, and the negative effects of climate change. Our oceans are our future. Together, let's build a sustainable blue economy, one that supports people, the planet, and prosperity.
Professor Ben Malayang III of Silliman University is an authority on archipelagic ecology whose area of competence includes fisheries and environmental policy and governance. Professor Ben, welcome to The Way Forward. What is the importance of developing our maritime environment?
The maritime environment is the very foundation for blue economy. The maritime environment constitutes the universe of all processes and materials, energy and information that are in our sea. You know, the ocean constitutes almost 75% of the total surface of the earth. And in the Philippines, which is very archipelagic, our seas, we have about 7 times more sea area than land. We have about 220 million hectares of seas and coasts, as against only about 29.8 million hectares of land.
What is the importance of biodiversity, conservation, and development when it comes to the maritime environment?
If we are not careful and we extract more than the capacity of the ocean to replenish the population of these living things, then you will consume outright and destroy the ecosystem's balance in our oceans. The end game, the end goal of conservation is really sustainability. There are many other human interests that impinge on this ability to sustain these living resources. Many other, what I call this harmonized development agenda that kind of erode the ability of our living resources and our seas to sustain the amenities that we get from them.
Are you in favor of reclamation?
No, reclamation are being done for a particular purpose. No, I don't want to say favor or not favor because these are always sui generis. If you do this reclamation, the problem is that much of the productivity of our oceans are really based on the productivity of our shorelines. The deep waters are really the so-called deserts of the sea. The real oases of the sea are in the shorelines, the shallow shorelines. Kailangan natin mag-agree on what would be the basis for determining when something is to be done in our coasts and waters and when they should not be done, and to what extent, if at all to be done, to what extent and scale they should be done. Overall, your seas and your coasts will continue to be productive.
Do you think the DENR has sufficient authority and enough capability to make those decisions that you mentioned are crucial in terms of deciding whether certain things should be done in our coastal areas or even in our water?
I would rather look at how government can complement each other, the government capabilities, so that DPWH are able to complement with DENR, complement with DSWD, so that local communities can be involved in the decision-making process. Dapat natin pagtitingnan yung paano yung mga proseso for making collective decision on how to best utilize and harness our blue economy for the purpose of a sustainable future for the Filipinos.
Is there any person, whether it's in the legislative or executive branch, that you find is championing this cause, meaning having the right knowledge and attention when it comes to the blue economy or maritime environment?
My first take would be the National Academy of Science and Technology. They're very much aware of this. The second take is that the academic community very much aware of this. especially those like the Marine Science Institute, Silliman, and all others that are involved in marine research. And then, of course, in the legislature of the country, we have people like Senator Loren Legarda, Congressman Benetes, who are pushing on this. Most of our public investments are on land, real estate, and all that kind of thing. But there's not much corresponding investment on harnessing the blue economy of the country, like in the West Philippine Sea, and in the Pacific side of the south side of our seas. Because makikita natin that the sea is not just a place; it's a productive system. Right now, most of the perspective in terms of oceans and countries is competition over resources. Wala pa tayong nakikitang collaboration and looking at the sea and our coastal areas as a global commons rather than a place for competition.
Thank you so much, Professor Ben. It was truly educational hearing you talk about the maritime environment and our blue economy.
Thank you very much for this time.
This is Attorney Karen Jimeno, and this is The Way Forward.
The maritime transport and services sector is the backbone of global trade, connecting nations, enabling commerce, and driving economic growth. In the Philippines, our maritime industry is a key pillar of the blue economy, supporting millions of jobs, ensuring food security, and facilitating over 90% of our trade. But beyond economic benefits, this industry faces pressing challenges: aging fleets, infrastructure gaps, environmental concerns, and climate change. As of 2023, the ocean economy contributed 943.05 billion pesos to the national GDP, with maritime transport and storage accounting for 141.74 billion pesos. Passenger traffic grew by 24.4%, and cargo throughput increased by 5.14%, proving the industry's vital role in economic growth. The ASEAN Blue Economy Framework highlights the importance of sustainable shipping, digital transformation, and regional cooperation to protect marine ecosystems while boosting economic growth. This aligns with the World Bank's Blue Economy model, which promotes economic development while ensuring the sustainability of our oceans and coastal communities. The 2012 Changwon Declaration urges nations to adopt innovative solutions, green infrastructure, and proactive policies to protect marine environments while maximizing economic potential. Investing in smart ports, low-emission vessels, and resilient infrastructure will be critical to achieving these goals. The Philippines remains one of the world's top sources of seafarers, with over 578,626 deployed in 2023 alone. Strengthening training programs, fair labor policies, and technological adaptation will ensure our workforce remains competitive in the global maritime industry. The future of maritime transport lies in innovation, sustainability, and strategic cooperation. By modernizing our ports, upgrading fleets, and prioritizing green technology, we can build a resilient, efficient, and eco-friendly maritime industry that benefits both the economy and the environment. Together, let's set sail toward a smarter, greener, and more sustainable maritime future.
We now have with us Ferdinand Inakay, a transport professional with over 30 years of collective experience in the management and operations of the various modes of transport and transport facilities. Ferdy, welcome to The Way Forward.
Thank you, Karen. It's a pleasure to be here.
What do you think is the importance of developing the maritime environment of our country and the maritime transport industry in particular?
Because, Karen, with 3 trillion trade volume going and coming through our waters, and also because the Philippines is an archipelagic country, it is really important to make sure that we develop this maritime industry in the Philippines.
At the moment, what do we need to further expand this trade volume?
I think we need to revisit our regulatory policies, that's one. Make it easier for importers and exporters to bring in and ship out cargoes into the Philippines. Permitting of ship activities, vessel operations, port operations. And if we can lessen the process, shorten the lead time, it would create a much friendlier shipping and maritime environment.
Ferdy, what about security?
In fact, we're working on a software where the NDRRMC monitoring system for tidal movements and all of that is already being put in place. Maybe we can just incorporate that system into it. So in terms of security, the Philippine Coast Guard can actually monitor movements of vessels.
We have approximately 20,000 maritime graduates annually. However, only 5,000 or around that much are absorbed. What is the issue there?
Most of those that are being recruited for hire are the ones that work in the cruise ships. They're waiters, they are entertainers, they are the room keepers. And right now, as the records state, I think what the government can do is try to ramp up maritime activity in the local business network. We need more ships in the inter-island transport system in central Philippines, which is the Visayas Mindanao area. You'd be surprised. There's been a growth of like 20% year on year on transport volume in the Visayan region, but not in Luzon or in Mindanao.
What type of support do you think it needs from the government, whether it's from the executive side or the legislative side?
We need to put in and rethink of our regulatory policies in the maritime sector. Let's make them more investor-friendly.
Are you aware if the maritime industry has been sufficiently included in the Strategic Investment Priorities Plan, or SIPP, that gives out incentives?
I believe that there is a pending bill in Congress, the Maritime Investment Development Plan, that's already on its third reading, and it embodies everything that you have mentioned.
How do current geopolitical issues affect our maritime transport industry?
Well, of course, there is constraint now in our West Philippine Sea for our fishermen. It is giving a lot of hardships to our local fishermen at this point.
Given your years of experience, what would you say is a low-hanging fruit that can be accomplished?
Probably we can also look into that model for the Philippine Ports Authority in clustering port operations for privatization, because then they can have a better attraction to potential investors, which would then redound to improvement in the operations of smaller ports and modernizing them as well.
Very helpful tips. Thank you so much, Ferdy, for your time today. We learned a lot from your expertise.
Thank you, Karen. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm so happy to share what I know with the possibility of improving and upgrading our blue economy.
And again, I'm attorney Karen Jimeno, and this is the way forward.
PRRM has spent over 7 decades in rural development. We were biased in favor of farmers, and the fisherfolk told us, food is not just rice, it is also fish. The Philippines is more than 300,000 square kilometers of land. Our exclusive economic zone is 2.2 million square kilometers. We are the 15th largest fishing nation in the world. The Philippines is a maritime and archipelagic nation, or MANA. Mana natin ito. We must defend it.
Dr. Chalito Habito is an economist, a professor, and a columnist who served concurrently as Director General of the National Economic and Development Authority and as Socio-Economic Planning Secretary during the administration of President Fidel Ramos. Dr. Chell, welcome to The Way Forward.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm pleased to be here.
For starters, as an economist, when we say that there's so much value in the blue economy, what value are we talking about?
That if you compare our blue economy resources, meaning our waters, which by the way comprise 4/5 or 80% of our total territory, compared to say 1 hectare of undeveloped land and 1 hectare equivalent of, let's say, ocean waters, there's likely to be more economic value that you can glean, you can actually derive from that same area of water in terms of fishery resources, in terms of potentials, of course, for tourism, potentials for energy generation, transport.
What is the cost of not developing our marine resources and inland waters?
I think right now we already have the lowest average income among the ASEAN 5, the 5 original ASEAN members. We used to be ahead of Indonesia. Indonesia has long overtaken us.
As someone coming from the NEDA, are they now more focused as well, not just on terrestrial resources, but also on our water and marine resources?
At least the word, the phrase blue economy does appear in our Philippine Development Plan now, but we don't really have a blueprint for really pursuing, tapping, and taking advantage of the opportunities therein. So what this implies is that let's have a roadmap. There is legislation that, of course, first recognizes the importance of the blue economy, and for some reason it's being delayed.
Who should take the lead in preparing this roadmap?
I think it logically falls under the task of the National Economic and Development Authority, or NEDA, being the chief planning agency of the government, to do this, because they have the overview of all the sectors of the economy.
And they do prepare the Philippine
And they are
Development
fast.
Plan.
All the plans,
that is
in fact.
a bit, it's supposed to be long-term, right?
Usually the PDPs correspond to the term of a president. But during the time of President Ramos in the 1990s, in 1995, he actually directed NEDA, when I was heading it, to draw up a 25-year plan. We all know the problem with the Philippines, that with every change of administration, things tend to be set aside. Every new administration, whether you're talking about the national or the local governments, every leader wants to have his or her own mark. I have to confess, for example, the 25-year plan that President Ramos asked us to prepare was a forgotten document by the time the next president came in.
One of the things that is a risk here is also what we call the tragedy of the commons. Because right now, there's no long-term or even any type of blueprint or plan for the blue economy. So how do we prevent overfishing, environmental degradation, and even, just generally Filipino citizens taking advantage of the blue economy without taking care of the environment and then risking the value that is there?
Government regulation has to come in trying to prevent this kind of, for example, overfishing of fishing grounds. And that's really where you have to declare marine protected areas so that there will be a moratorium on fishing to allow the fishery resources to regenerate. But let me cite the reason why Elinor Ostrom won the Nobel Prize for, essentially to prove or to establish, in fact, to debunk the tragedy of the commons by saying that if communities are allowed to work together and manage a resource, then it is unlikely that you will have the tragedy of the commons where, everybody tends to overexploit the natural resource. But this bantay dagat type of mechanism is an example of that. Community-based management of the fishery resources. In forestry, the same thing applies. And so clearly that is one way. Without even the government stepping in. In fact, the government's role should be to enable and to facilitate these kinds of community-driven initiatives to happen.
But when it comes to our local communities in the Philippines, unless someone steps in or at least organizes the community, it's forgotten in the day-to-day, especially if you have poor communities who worry about the basic necessities of every day.
True. And that's the reason why community leadership is very important.
What would be, do you think, are concrete next steps and realistic objectives that can be achieved in the medium term?
Well, one of the most urgent things to do is to really fix governance and institutions. The common thing that came out was the need to really have much more local government participation and community participation, and then enough of the too much top-down type of governance. We have the local government code, so we simply have to invoke and assert that. We just need to make sure everybody is working together communicating with one another, and pursuing initiatives in unison so that we end up not stepping on each other's toes as we pursue whatever our objectives are.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chel. It was truly wonderful to hear your insights today.
It was a pleasure, Karen. Thank you.
We just concluded our conversation with Dr. Chelito Habito. I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno, and this is The Way Forward. The Philippines is a maritime archipelagic nation, or MANA. The Philippines' exclusive economic zone covers an estimated 2.2 million square kilometers of water. In the West Philippine Sea, an estimated $3.3 trillion of trade passes annually. We sit with thought leaders who will answer in-depth questions about maritime transport and tourism. I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno, and this is The Way Forward.
PRRM has spent over 7 decades in rural development. We were biased in favor of farmers, and the fisherfolk told us, food is not just rice, it is also fish. The Philippines is more than 300,000 square kilometers of land. Our exclusive economic zone is 2.2 million square kilometers. We are the 15th largest fishing nation in the world. The Philippines is a maritime and archipelagic nation, or MANA. MANA natin ito. We must defend it.